Good day, everyone. My name is Eng. I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to the BLM2 ICM for Organizing Committee for selecting my research topic entitled Determinants of Technology Startup Valuation During and Post Health Crisis, a qualitative study in investors' perspective in Malaysia. The COVID 19 pandemic has disrupted our daily life and the global economy. It had put a lot of countries, including United States, India, Brazil, France, United Kingdom, Malaysia, and others in alarming situations off guard. As of 27 August 2021, there were 214 million cases and 4.47 million deaths globally. Even in best case COVID-19 scenario, conservative estimation, the world monetary GDP loss is forecasted at 76.69 billion US dollars. This pandemic is worse than any other crisis, surpassing other previous health crises such as Spanish flu in 1918 that decreased real GDP per capita by approximately 6% in the typical country over the period of 3 years, or SARS that reduced 1% of China's GDP, or even surpassing other crises like the subprime mortgage crisis in 2008 that has not fully recovered even after 10 years. In Malaysia alone, 2020 has become the year with highest unemployment rate for the past 10 years at 5.3%. Not only that, 30,000 local businesses have closed down since March 2020, and 70% of these business closures were micro enterprises. Micro enterprises comprises of both manufacturing and service providers with sales turnovers of less than 300,000 ringgit Malaysia or less than 5 employees. There are several hundred thousand micro enterprises in Malaysia, representing approximately 70% of small and medium enterprises. It is a serious indication that more businesses may fail during this health crisis. Despite this alarming business closure, the number of new business registration grew from year 2019 to 2020. This may be due to the high unemployment rate or retrenchment during this period. In order to survive during this pandemic, entrepreneurs need to adapt to the new norm. They are rushing to future-proof their businesses by rapid implementation of Industrial 4.0. This is an important reason as to why this research is imperative to emphasize on technology startup firms in Malaysia to find the impacts of COVID-19 on technology startups, as well as exploring the determinants of these startups' valuation during and post-health crisis in the investor's perspective in Malaysia, as indicated in my research title. In an ideal world, investors invest a fair value to purchase share of technology startup firms. But in most circumstances, this fair value is difficult to be achieved. It is near impossible. A more stable word to denote this investment scenario is willing buyer, willing seller. In any context, there must be a basis for valuation. As startups may not have rigid financial numbers or tractions in the early years, this technology startup firm's valuation will be likely based on potentials and projections. Overall, the valuation of startup is generally challenging. With the current pandemic, the valuation is even more challenging as the contingencies and uncertainties may become part of the factors in technology startup valuation, which leads to the findings of the research. The purpose of the study is to extend the previous research done by a researcher, Korn, in 2018 on the determinants of startup valuation in the venture capital context. The framework illustrates how startup valuations in the VC context are shaped by a three-sided interplay of factors related to startups, venture capitalists, and external environment. The determinants may be maintained, changed, or totally get eliminated from the current framework due to the change of market sentiment in the investment context during and post health crisis like the current COVID-19 pandemic upon completion of this research. Thus, this research aims to number one, understand the potential effects of COVID-19 on technology startup valuations by investors, and number two, help investors to identify determinant factors that investors will consider when making an investment decision on technology startup. Upon completion of this research, two research questions will be answered. The related questions are, will investors continue to invest in startups amid health crisis like the current COVID-19 pandemic? And if they do, how do investors value a prospective startup when they make an investment decision? How exactly this research is carried out? Semi-structured interviews will be conducted among 20 investors or potential investors that meet the preset criteria. Questions were formulated to identify the factors or determinants. Interviews were also recorded, transcribed verbatim, and coded according to the underlying theories. The main feature of the transcript are coded accordingly. The codes were then analyzed and labeled according to the research questions. Initial patterns or themes will be identified. These themes form the basis of the thematic analysis. The themes will be reviewed. Boundaries were set through naming and defining the themes before categorizing the data and moving to the next stage. Previous studies has been focused on conventional business valuations. There are also limited research done in identifying the impact of COVID-19 on technology startup valuation by investors, as well as lack of research in determining key factors that investors will consider when making an investment decision on technology startup during crisis. This research provides contributions both theoretically and practically. The academic support of institutional theory and resource-based field theory in this research contribute to the body of knowledge. This research delivers an understanding the potential effects of COVID-19, both positive and negative impacts on technology startups valuation by investors, as well as delivering a holistic conceptual framework to rationalize the determinants of technology startup valuation during pandemic. Through its practical applications, the new conceptual framework facilitates and encourages investors to invest in technology startup firms in Malaysia. It also supports the local policymakers in crafting relevant initiatives to stipulate subsidies and government grants to help technology startup firms to sustain and eventually grow their businesses, thus improving the already weak economy due to the current health crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. The expected results of this research are: first, the impact of COVID-19 on technology startup valuation by investors will be identified. Second, determinants of technology startup valuation by investors will be established. And finally, a new conceptual framework will be developed. This brings us to the end of the presentation. I hope the stakeholder of the startup ecosystem can be benefited from the finding of this theory. Thank you for listening and stay safe.